How's it going, guys? Today it is October 8th. This is Read Aloud 19. Here we go. Just made that up a couple minutes ago. It's not bad. I don't know if I like the first chord. It's in a D minor, but it's not bad. Here we go. Oof, we are flying through this book. Look at that. Okay. Oh yeah, they just got rescued by the eagles. I love that part. Okay, not far below, the goblins and the wolves were scattering far and wide in the woods. A few eagles were still circling and sweeping above the battleground. The flames about the trees sprang suddenly up above the highest branches. They went up in crackling fire. There was a sudden flurry of sparks and smoke. Bilbo had escaped only just in time. Soon the light of the burning was faint below, a red twinkle on the black floor, and they were high up in the sky, rising all the time in strong, sweeping circles. Bilbo never forgot that flight. Clinging onto Dory's ankles, he moaned, my arms," but Dory groaned, my poor legs, my poor legs. At the best of times, heights made Bilbo giddy. He used to turn queer if he looked over the edge of quite a little cliff, and he had never liked ladders, let alone trees, never having had to escape from wolves before. So you can imagine how his head swam now when he looked down between his dangling toes and saw the dark lands opening wide underneath him, touching here and there with the light of the moon on a hillside rock or a stream in the plains. The pale peak of the mountains were coming near, moonlit spikes of rock sticking out of black shadows. Summer or not, it seemed very cold. He shut his eyes and wondered if he could hold on any longer, and then he imagined what would happen if he did not. He felt sick. The flight ended only just in time for him. Just before his arms gave way, he loosed Dory's ankles with a grasp and fell onto the rough platform of an eagle's eyrie. There he lay without speaking, and his thoughts were a mixture of surprise at being saved from the fire and fear lest he fall off that narrow place in the deep shadows on either side. He was feeling very queer indeed in his head by this time after the dreadful adventures of the last 3 days with next to nothing to eat. And he found himself saying aloud, now I know what a piece of bacon feels like when it is suddenly picked out of a pan on a fork and put back on the shelf. No, you don't, he heard Dory answering, because the bacon knows that it will go back in the pan sooner or later, and it is to be hoped we shan't. Also, eagles aren't forks. Oh no, not a bit like storks. Forks, I mean, said Bilbo, sitting up and looking anxiously at the eagle who was perched close by. He wondered what other nonsense he had been saying, and if the eagle would think it rude. You ought not be rude to an eagle when you are only the size of a hobbit and you're up in his eyrie at night. The eagle only sharpened his beak on a stone and trimmed his feathers and took no notice. Soon another eagle flew up. The Lord of Eagles bids you to bring your prisoners to the great shelf, he cried, and was off again. The other seized Dory in his claws and flew away with him in the night, leaving Bilbo all alone. He had just the strength to wonder what the message had meant by prisoners, and to begin to think of being torn up for supper like a rabbit when his own turn came. The eagle came back, seized him in his talons by the back of his coat, and swooped off. This time he flew only a short way. Very soon Bilbo was laid down, trembling with fear, on a wide shelf of rock in the mountainside. There was no path down onto it save by flying, and no path down off it except by jumping over a precipice. There he found all the others sitting with their backs to the mountain wall. The Lord of the Eagle was also there, speaking to Gandalf. It seemed that Bilbo was not going to be eaten after all. The wizard and the Eagle Lord appeared to know one another slightly, and even to be on friendly terms. As a matter of fact, Gandalf, who had often been in the mountains, had once rendered a service to the eagles and healed their lord from an arrow wound. So you see, prisoners had meant prisoners rescued from the goblins only, and not captives of the eagles. As Bilbo listened to talk of Gandalf, he realized that at last they were going to escape really and truly from the dreadful mountains. He was discussing plans with the great eagle for carrying the dwarves and himself and Bilbo far away and setting them down well on their journey across the plains below. The Lord of the Eagles would not take them anywhere near where men live. They would shoot at us with their great bows of yew, he said, for they would think we were after their sheep. And at other times they would be right. No, we are glad to cheat the goblins of their sport, and glad to repay our thanks to you. But we will not risk ourselves for dwarves in the southern plains. Very well, said Gandalf. Take us where and as far as you will. We are already deeply obliged to you. But in the meantime we are famished with hunger. I am nearly dead of it, said Bilbo in a weak little voice that nobody heard. That can perhaps be mended, said the Lord of the Eagles. Later on you might have seen a bright fire on the shelf of rock, and the figures of the dwarves around it cooking and making a fine roasting smell. The eagles had brought up dry boughs for fuel, and they had brought rabbits, hares, and small sheep. The dwarf managed all the preparations. Bilbo was too weak to help, and anyway, he was not much good at skinning rabbits or cutting out meat, being used to having it delivered by the butcher all ready to cook. Gandalf, too, was lying down after doing his part in setting fire going, since Oin and Gloin had lost their tinderboxes. Dwarves had never taken to matches even yet. So ending the adventures of the Misty Mountains, soon Bilbo's stomach was feeling full and comfortable again, and he felt he could sleep contently, though he would have liked a loaf of butter better than bits of meat toasted on sticks. Here's a picture of the dwarves eating up there with the eagles. He slept curled up on a hard rock more soundly than ever he had done on his feather bed in his own little hole at home. But all night he dreamed of his own house, and wandered in his sleep into all his different rooms, looking for something that he could not find nor remember what it looked like. Chapter 7, Queer Lodgings. The next morning, Bilbo woke up with the early sun in his eyes. He jumped up to look at the time and to go put his kettle on, and found he was not home at all. He sat down and wished in vain for a wash and a brush. He did not get either, nor tea, nor toast, nor bacon for his breakfast, only cold mutton and rabbit, and after that he had to get ready for a fresh start. This time he was allowed to climb on to an eagle's back and cling between his wings. The air rushed over him in his eyes, and he shut his eyes. Oh, look at that, 2 pictures in a row. The dwarves were crying farewells and promising to repay the lords of the eagle if they ever could, as off rose 15 great birds from the mountainside. The sun was still close to the eastern edge of things. The morning was cool, and the mists were in the valleys and hollows entwined here and there about the peaks and pinnacles of the hills. Bilbo opened an eye to peep and saw that the birds were already high up and the world was far away, and the mountains were falling back behind them in the distance. He shut his eyes again and held on tighter. Don't pinch, said his eagle. You need not be frightened like a rabbit, even if you look rather like one. It is a fair morning with little wind. What is finer than flying? Bilbo would have liked to say a warm bath and late breakfast on the lawn afterwards, but he thought it better to say nothing at all and to let go his clutch a tiny bit. After a good while, the eagles must have seen the point they were making for, even from their great height, for they began to go down, circling round in great spirals. They did this for a long while, and at last the hobbit opened his eyes again. The earth was much nearer, and below them were trees that looked like oaks and elms and wide grasslands, and a river running through it. But cropping out of the ground, right in the path of the stream, which looped itself about it, was a great rock, almost a hill of stone, like a last outpost of the distant mountains, or a huge piece cast miles into the plains by some giant among giants. Quickly now to the top of this rock, the eagles swooped one by one and set down their passengers. Farewell, they cried, wherever you fare, till your eyries receive you at the journey's end. That is the polite thing to say among eagles. May the wind under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks, answered Gandalf, who knew the correct reply. And so they parted, and though the Lord of the Eagles became and though the Lord of the Eagles became in after days the king of all birds, and wore a golden crown, and his 15 chieftains golden collars made of the gold that the dwarves gave them, Bilbo never saw them again, except high and far off in the battle of the 5 armies. But as that comes at the end of this tale, we will say no more about it just now. There was a flat space on the top of the hill of stone, and a well-worn path with many steps leading down it to the river, across which a fort of huge flat stones led to the grassland beyond the stream. There was a little cave, a wholesome one with a pebbly floor, and at the bottom of the steps and near the end of the stony fjord, here the party gathered and discussed what was to be done. I always meant to see you all safe, if possible, over the mountains, said the wizard, and now by good management and good luck I have done it. Indeed, we are now a great deal further east than I ever meant to come with you, for after all, this is not my adventure. I may look on it again before it is all over, but in the meanwhile I have some other pressing business to attend to. The dwarves groaned and looked most distressed, and Bilbo wept. They had begun to think Gandalf was going to come all the way and would always be there to help them out of difficulties. I'm not going to disappear this very instant, said he. I can give you a day or 2 more. Probably I can help you out of your present plight, and I need a little help myself. We have no food and no baggage and no ponies to ride, and you don't know where you are. Now I can tell you that you are still some miles north of the path which we should have been following, if we had not left the mountain pass in a hurry. Very few people live in these parts unless they come here since I was last down this way, which is some years ago. But there is somebody that I know of who lives not far away. That somebody made the steps on the great rock, the Carrick I believe they call it. He does not come here often, certainly not in the daytime, and it is no good waiting for him. In fact, it would be very dangerous. We must go and find him, and if all goes well at our meeting, I think I shall be off and wish you like the eagles farewell wherever you fare. They begged him not to leave. They offered him dragon gold and silver and jewels, but he would not change his mind. We shall see, he said, and I think I have earned already some of your dragon gold when you have got it. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks, guys.